The hallway was silent, except for the sound of heels on marble. Camilla walked with purpose through the east corridor of Clarence's house, her assistant trailing 3 steps behind. It was just past 9 in the morning. The spring light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the Persian rugs. She had lived in this house for years. She knew every room, every corner, every portrait on the walls. But today, something felt different. At the end of the corridor stood a door she had passed 100 times before. Dark oak, brass handle. Nothing special about it. Except today, there was a guard standing in front of it. Not just any guard. This was Thomas Harrington, a young man she recognized from palace rotations. He stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind his back, eyes forward. His red uniform was spotless. His expression was stone. Camilla slowed her pace. She had never seen a guard posted at this particular door before. "Good morning," she said, her voice pleasant but firm. "Good morning, ma'am." She reached for the door handle. "I need to access the private wing. Before you hear what happens next, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the rest of this unbelievable story. Now, back to that hallway." Thomas stepped slightly to the left. Not aggressive. Not rude, just blocking her path. "I'm afraid I can't allow that, ma'am." The words hung in the air. Camilla blinked. She looked at him, then at the door, then back at him. Her assistant froze behind her, eyes wide. "I'm sorry." Camilla's voice was quieter now, but there was an edge to it. "The private wing is currently restricted, ma'am." "Restricted?" She let out a short laugh, but it didn't sound amused. "This is my home." "Yes, ma'am." Then opened the door. Thomas didn't flinch. "I have direct orders from the Prince of Wales, ma'am." The silence that followed was thick. Camilla stared at him. Her jaw tightened. Her hands, which had been relaxed at her sides, slowly curled into fists. She had been many things in her life. Patient, strategic, resilient. But she was not used to being told no. Not in her own home. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have orders from His Royal Highness," Thomas repeated. His voice was steady, professional. But there was something in his eyes. Not defiance. Something else. Sympathy, maybe. Or discomfort. Camilla took a step closer. "And what exactly are those orders?" Thomas swallowed. "I am to prevent anyone from entering the private wing until further notice. No exceptions. Anyone." She leaned in. "Or just me?" He didn't answer. That silence was the answer. Camilla felt heat rising in her chest. Her mind raced. Why would Charles do this? What was behind that door? And why now, on this ordinary Tuesday morning, had everything suddenly changed? She glanced down the hallway. Empty. No staff. No witnesses. Just her assistant, and this young guard who wouldn't budge. "Step aside," she said, her voice colder now. Thomas met her gaze. "I can't do that, ma'am." What happened next would change everything. Asterisk, asterisk, for a long moment. Camilla didn't move. Her assistant cleared her throat softly. A gentle reminder that this standoff was going nowhere. But Camilla wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. "Where is Charles?" she asked. "I don't have that information, ma'am," Thomas replied. "Then call him." "I'm afraid I can't do that either." Camilla's eyes narrowed. She had dealt with diplomats, journalists, critics, and royals, far more intimidating than this young man. But something about the way he stood there, so calm and unmovable, made her realize this wasn't a battle she could win. Not right now. She took a breath, composed herself, smoothed the front of her jacket. "Very well," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked back down the corridor, heels clicking sharply on the marble. Her assistant hurried to keep up. Once they were out of earshot, Camilla stopped. She pressed her fingers to her temple and closed her eyes. "Find Charles," she said. "Yes, ma'am." Now, the assistant nodded and disappeared down a side hallway. Phone already in hand, Camilla stood alone in the corridor. The light through the windows felt too bright now. Everything felt wrong. She replayed the conversation in her mind. The guard's words, his tone, The way he had looked at her. He wasn't being cruel. He was following orders, which meant someone had given him very specific instructions. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Minutes passed. 10. 20. Finally, her assistant returned, slightly out of breath. He's in London, ma'am. At a private meeting. He's expected back this afternoon. This afternoon? Camilla's voice rose. Did you tell them it was urgent?
I did.
They said he would call when he was available. Camilla felt her stomach tighten. Available. As if she were some appointment on his calendar. She turned and walked toward the sitting room. She needed space. She needed to think. Inside, she paced, back and forth across the room. Her mind churned through possibilities. Was this about money? Property? A disagreement she had forgotten? Or something worse? The private wing wasn't large. Just a few rooms. Charles's office. A storage room. A library he rarely used. Nothing that should require a guard. Unless there was something in there he didn't want her to see. That thought stopped her cold. She stood in the middle of the room, staring at nothing. Her heart beat a little faster. Her hands felt cold. What if this wasn't about orders? What if this was about trust? A knock at the door startled her. "Come in," she called. It was Margaret, one of the senior housekeepers. She was older, her face lined with years of service. She had been with the household longer than Camilla had. Margaret said carefully. "I heard there was some confusion this morning." Confusion. Camilla almost laughed. "Is that what we're calling it?" Margaret stepped inside and closed the door softly behind her. She glanced around as if checking for listeners. "I don't know what's happening," she said quietly. "But I can tell you this. The guard was posted there last night. Around midnight?" Camilla's eyes sharpened. "Last night." "Yes, ma'am. And there's been activity in the private wing. Voices, movement. I don't know who or what, but something is going on." "Did you see Charles?" Margaret shook her head. "No, ma'am. But I heard his voice. And someone else's." "Whose?" Margaret hesitated. "I'm not certain. But it sounded like a woman." The room seemed to shrink. Camilla felt the air leave her lungs. A woman. In the private wing? In the middle of the night? And now, a guard blocking the door. Following orders from Charles, she sank into a chair, her mind spinning. This wasn't about documents or meetings or household disputes. This was something else entirely, and she needed to find out what. The hours crawled by. Camilla tried to focus on other things. Correspondence, charity work, a phone call with her daughter. But her mind kept drifting back to that door, that guard, that voice in the night. By 2 o'clock, she couldn't take it anymore. She left the sitting room and walked through the house, this time taking a different route. If she couldn't go through the door, maybe she could find another way. The private wing had windows. It had a service entrance used by staff. If someone was in there, there had to be signs. She found herself in the garden, standing beneath the tall windows of the private wing. The curtains were drawn, all of them. That was unusual. Charles never closed those curtains during the day. She stood there, staring up, feeling foolish and desperate in equal measure. Then she heard footsteps behind her, ma'am. She turned. It was Thomas, the guard. He must have been relieved from his post, because he was no longer in full uniform. Just the pants and a white shirt, the jacket draped over his arm. He looked uncomfortable. "Can I help you with something?" Camilla asked, her voice cool. Thomas glanced around. They were alone. The garden was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic beyond the walls. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. For this morning, Camilla studied him. He was young, mid-20s maybe. His face was earnest. Whatever game was being played, he wasn't enjoying his part in it. "You were following orders," she said. "I understand that." Still, he shifted his weight. It didn't feel right. She softened slightly. "What's your name?" "Thomas Harrington, ma'am." "How long have you been with the household guard?" 2 years. "And in those 2 years, have you ever been asked to do something like this before?" He hesitated, then shook his head. No, ma'am. Do you know why you were given those orders? Another pause. Longer this time? He looked torn. I shouldn't say, he finally murmured. But you want to. He met her eyes. I don't know the details, but I know it's not. It's not what you think, Camilla frowned. Then what is it? Thomas glanced toward the house, then back at her. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It's not about another woman, ma'am. It's about protection. Protection from what? Not from what. For what he swallowed. There's something in there. Something valuable. Something that needs to be kept safe. And the prince wanted to make absolutely sure no one interfered before he could explain it to you himself. Camilla's heart slowed. Explain what? I don't know. I wasn't told. But I heard him on the phone last night. He sounded stressed, like he was trying to handle something delicate. She absorbed this protection, something valuable, not another woman. Relief mixed with confusion? Then why not just tell me? She asked. I think he planned to, but something went wrong. He had to leave suddenly, and he didn't want to risk. Thomas trailed off. Risk what? I think he didn't want you to see it before he could be here to show you. To explain it properly, Camilla turned away, staring back up at those drawn curtains. Her mind raced through possibilities. Documents. Art. Family heirlooms. When is he coming back? She asked. 4 o'clock, ma'am. He called an hour ago. He said he'd be here by 4. She'd checked her watch. An hour and a half? And the guard? She asked. Is he still at the door? Yes, ma'am. Until the prince arrives. Camilla nodded slowly. She felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. Not completely, but enough. Thank you, Thomas, she said quietly, for telling me. He nodded. I probably shouldn't have. I won't mention it. He gave a small, grateful smile, then turned and walked back. Toward the house, Camilla stayed in the garden a moment longer. The air was cool. The sun was bright, and for the first time that day, she felt like she could breathe. But the question remained. What was behind that door? And why was Charles so desperate to keep it hidden? Asterisk at 4:15. Charles still hadn't arrived. Camilla sat in the drawing room, a book open in her lap that she wasn't reading. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the window, watching for his car. Her assistant had checked twice. No updates. Traffic, they said. He was on his way. But the waiting was unbearable. She thought about Thomas's words. Protection. Something valuable. Charles had sounded stressed. That didn't narrow it down much. Charles was always stressed about something. Duty. Legacy. The weight of the crown that would one day be his. But this felt different. At 4:30, she heard the crunch of gravel outside. Car doors. Voices. She stood quickly, setting the book aside. Her heart beat faster. She smoothed her dress, composed her face, and waited. Footsteps in the hallway. Then the door opened. Charles stepped inside. He looked tired. His tie was loosened. There were shadows under his eyes. Darling, he said, but his voice lacked its usual warmth. Charles. She didn't move toward him. We need to talk. I know. He closed the door behind him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. There's a guard outside the private wing, Camilla said evenly. Yes, he wouldn't let me in. No. I told him not to. The bluntness of it stung. Why? Charles crossed to the window, hands in his pockets. He stared out at the garden. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Because I needed time. Time for what? To figure out how to tell you? Camilla felt her stomach tighten again. Tell me what? He turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. Not angry. Not cold, just heavy. Do you remember last month? He asked when I went to Scotland. Yes. I told you it was estate business. It wasn't. He shook his head slowly. It was family business. My mother's solicitor contacted me. There were some items. Personal effects. Things she had kept locked away for years. Things she wanted me to have after she was gone. Camilla's breath caught. The Queen, of course. They've been in storage, Charles continued. Private storage. Under strict instructions, I was finally able to retrieve them last week. What kind of items? Letters, photographs, personal journals. He paused. And something else. What? Charles looked at her directly now. A portrait. Camilla frowned. A portrait of whom? Of Diana. The name landed like a stone in still water. Camilla felt her chest tighten. She said nothing. Just waited. It was commissioned privately, Charles said. Before she died, my mother had it done. Not for public display. For the family, for the boys. It was meant to be kept safe until the time was right, and you brought it here? Yes, last night. I wanted to decide where it should go, how it should be presented, whether it should be given to William or Harry or kept here for now. In the private wing, Camilla said quietly. Yes, she absorbed this. A portrait of Diana, hidden away all these years. And now here, in this house. Their house. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Charles's expression softened. Because I didn't know how you'd feel about it. You thought I'd be angry? I thought you'd be hurt. She looked away. He wasn't wrong. I didn't want you to think I was keeping secrets, Charles continued, or that I was trying to hide something from you. But I also didn't want you to stumble upon it without warning. It's a difficult piece, emotional, and I needed to think about how to handle it properly. Camilla sat down slowly. Her mind was spinning, but not with anger. With something more complicated, sadness, understanding, and a strange kind of relief. Can I see it? She asked. Charles hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. They walked together through the house, down the east corridor. The guard was still there. When he saw Charles, he stepped aside immediately. Charles unlocked the door. Inside, the room was dim. The curtains were still drawn, but in the center, on an easel covered with a cloth, was the portrait. Charles walked over to it. His hand hovered over the cloth. It's beautiful, he said quietly, and painful, and he pulled the cloth away. Camilla stood very still. The portrait was stunning. Diana sat in a chair wearing a simple cream dress. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her expression was calm, almost serene. But her eyes held something else. Depth, sadness, a kind of knowing it wasn't the Diana the world had seen. Not the shy bride. Not the fashion icon. Not the confident humanitarian. This was Diana as a mother. As a woman. As someone who had loved and lost and carried on. The artist had captured something raw. Something true. Camilla felt a tightness in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She had prepared herself for jealousy, maybe, or resentment. But what she felt now was something entirely different. Grief, not for herself. For Charles, for William and Harry. For the woman in the portrait who had deserved so much more than she got. She was so young, Camilla said softly. Charles stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back. Yes, when was this painted? 1996. Just over a year before she died. Camilla looked closer. There was something in Diana's posture. A quiet strength, like she knew the world was watching, but had decided to be herself anyway. The boys need to see this, Camilla said. Charles glanced at her, surprised. You think so? I know so. She turned to him. This isn't about us, Charles. It's about them. It's their mother, and they deserve to have this. Charles's expression softened. Relief washed over his face. I wasn't sure you'd understand. I'm not a monster, Camilla said quietly. I know what she meant to them. I know what she still means to them. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. For a moment, they stood there together, looking at the portrait. Two people bound by love and history and all the complicated, messy things that came with it. I'm sorry, Charles said. For the guard, for the secrecy. I should have trusted you. You were trying to protect me, Camilla said. and her memory. I understand that. Wanted to find the right moment, the right words. There are no right words for something like this. He smiled faintly. No, I suppose not. Camilla looked back at the portrait. Diana's eyes seemed to follow her. Not accusatory, just present. A reminder that some things couldn't be erased or forgotten. And maybe they shouldn't be. Where will you put it? Camilla asked. I thought perhaps at Highgrove. In the upstairs sitting room? Somewhere private. Somewhere the boys can see it when they visit. That's good. Charles squeezed her hand gently. Thank you, she nodded. Will you call them? William and Harry? Yes, I'll call them tonight. They stood there a moment longer. Then Camilla stepped back, releasing his hand. I'll leave you with her, she said softly. Charles looked at her, surprised. You don't have to go. I know, but I think you need a moment. Just you and her. He didn't argue. He just nodded, gratitude clear in his eyes. Camilla walked to the door. As she reached for the handle, she paused and looked back. Charles stood in front of the portrait, his shoulders slightly hunched. He looked older in that moment, wearier, but also softer. More human. She slipped out quietly and closed the door behind her. In the hallway, the guard was still there. He looked at her carefully, as if bracing for anger. It's all right, Camilla said gently. You were just doing your job. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, ma'am. She walked back down the corridor, her footsteps echoing on the marble. The house felt different now, quieter, calmer. When she reached the sitting room, she sank into a chair and closed her eyes. She had been married to Charles for nearly 20 years. But Diana had been his first love, his first wife, the mother of his children, and no amount of time or distance could erase that. Camilla had made peace with that long ago. Or so she thought. But today, standing in front of that portrait, she had felt it fully. The weight of what Diana had been, what she still was, not a rival, not a ghost, a part of the story, a part that couldn't be rewritten. And for the first time, Camilla realized she didn't want to rewrite it. Some stories needed to be remembered, honored, kept, safe, even when they hurt. Asterisk, asterisk, that evening. The house felt quieter than usual. Charles had made his calls. First William, then Harry. Camilla hadn't asked what was said. Some conversations were meant to be private, but when Charles came back downstairs, he looked lighter, like a burden had been lifted. They want to see it, he said simply. When? This weekend. Both of them. Camilla nodded. Good. They had dinner together. Not in the formal dining room, but in the smaller breakfast room. Just the two of them? The conversation was easy, normal. They talked about upcoming engagements, about the garden, about nothing in particular, but underneath it all, something had shifted. Later, as they sat in the drawing room, Camilla found herself thinking about the guard again. Thomas, the young man who had stood his ground that morning. You gave very specific orders, she said quietly. Charles looked up from his newspaper. I did. You knew I'd try to get in. I thought you might. And you trusted that guard to stop me? Charles set the paper down. I trusted him to follow orders, even when it was difficult. It was difficult, Camilla said. For both of us. I know, and I'm sorry it happened that way. But I couldn't risk you seeing the portrait before I could explain. Before I could be there with you, Camilla understood. In the moment, it had felt like a betrayal. But now, looking back, she could see what he had been trying to do. Protect her. Protect Diana's memory. Protect his sons. Sometimes love meant making hard choices. Even when they hurt. Will you keep the guard posted? She asked. No, not anymore. The portrait will be moved to Highgrove tomorrow. After the boys have seen it? And the private wing? Back to normal. Just storage and old files. Camilla smiled faintly. No more secrets? Charles met her eyes. No more secrets. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the night was still. Do you know what I thought? Camilla said eventually. This morning, Yes, when the guard wouldn't let me in. What did you think? That you were hiding something. Someone. That after all these years, I was about to discover something that would break us. Charles's expression tightened. Never. You have to know that. Do now. But in that moment I didn't, and it terrified me. He reached across and took her hand. I'm sorry I put you through that. You were trying to do the right thing, Camilla said. It just didn't feel right in the moment. No, I suppose it didn't. She squeezed his hand. We're all right, though. Aren't we? Yes, Charles said firmly. We're all right. They were. The next morning, Camilla woke early. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting golden light across the gardens. She walked through the house, past the east corridor, past the door that had caused so much turmoil the day before. The guard was gone. The door was unlocked. Everything was back to normal, but Camilla knew that normal was a relative term. Life in this house, in this family, was never truly simple. There were always ghosts, always memories, always complicated histories that refused to stay buried. But maybe that was all right. Maybe. Past didn't need to be hidden. It just needed to be honored, understood, accepted. Asterisk, she thought about Diana, about the portrait, about the woman who had walked these halls before her, who had loved these men, who had left a mark that could never be erased. Camilla had spent so many years being compared to her, being measured against her, being reminded that she was the second choice, the other woman, the one who didn't belong. But standing in that room yesterday, looking at that portrait, she had felt something shift. She wasn't Diana. She never would be. And that was all right. Because Charles didn't need another Diana. He needed her. Camilla, with all her flaws and strengths and complicated history, and she needed him. Later that day, William and Harry arrived. Camilla greeted them warmly, then gave them space. They went to the private wing with Charles. They stayed for over an hour. When they emerged, their eyes were red, but they were smiling, talking quietly, touching their father's shoulder. Camilla watched from the doorway of the sitting room. She didn't intrude. This moment wasn't hers. But when they were leaving, William stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For understanding. For not making this harder than it already was. Camilla felt her throat tighten. She nodded, unable to find words. Harry stepped forward and hugged her briefly. It was quick, awkward, but genuine. Then they were gone. Charles stood beside her as the car pulled away. They appreciated it, he said. What you said? What you did? I didn't do anything. You did more than you realize. Camilla looked at him. She was their mother, Charles. Nothing I do or say will ever change that. And nothing should. He kissed her forehead gently. That's why I love you. They walked back inside together. The house felt warm now, lived in, real. And as Camilla closed the door behind them, she realized something. The guard hadn't been protecting a secret. He had been protecting a family. And sometimes that meant standing in the way, even when it was hard, even when it hurt, because love, real love, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about making room for it.